The cold bit through Katherine Everett's worn coat like 1,000 tiny knives as she stood alone at the crossroads, watching her stepbrother's wagon disappear into the white expanse of the Colorado Territory winter of 1876. He had promised their dying mother he would see Katherine safely to their aunt in Denver, but 15 miles outside of Georgetown, Marcus had simply stopped the wagon, told her to get out, and said he was done carrying dead weight. The small bag containing all her worldly possessions lay at her feet in the snow, and Katherine felt the numbness in her fingers had nothing to do with the December wind that howled across the mountain pass. She was 22 years old, alone, and the sun was already beginning its descent behind the peaks. Katherine pulled her shawl tighter and looked at the 4 dirt roads that met at this desolate junction. One led back toward Georgetown, though she had no money for lodging and knew no one there. Another continued toward Denver, but that was still miles away through increasingly treacherous terrain. The other 2 roads seemed to lead into even more remote wilderness. Her breath came out in white clouds as panic began to claw at her chest. Marcus had taken everything their mother left them, claiming it was his right as the man of the family. Never mind that they shared no blood, and his father had only married her mother 3 years before the fever took them both. The wind picked up, and Katherine realized with growing horror that she could no longer feel her toes. She had to make a choice. Georgetown was closest, and at least it was a real town. She picked up her bag and started walking back the way they had come, her boots crunching in the snow that was beginning to fall harder now. The sky had turned an ominous gray, and Katherine knew enough about mountain weather to understand she was in serious danger. She had walked perhaps a quarter mile when her legs began to feel heavy. The cold was seeping through her thin coat, and her skirts were becoming wet and frozen around her ankles. Each step took more effort than the last. Katherine's mind began to wander, thinking of her mother's kind face, of the little house in Kansas they had lived in before everything fell apart, of the dreams she had once harbored of teaching school or perhaps opening a seamstress shop. Those dreams seemed impossibly distant now, as distant as the town she could no longer see through the thickening snowfall. Her foot caught on something buried beneath the snow, and Katherine fell hard, her hands plunging into the icy powder. She tried to push herself up, but her arms shook with the effort. This was how it would end, she thought with strange clarity. Frozen on a mountain road because her stepbrother valued his convenience over her life. She wondered if anyone would even find her body before spring. The sound of hoofbeats and jingling harness cut through her despair. Katherine lifted her head to see a rider approaching through the snow, leading a pack horse. He was tall in the saddle, wearing a heavy canvas coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the weather. As he drew closer, he urged his horse into a faster pace, and within moments he had dismounted and was kneeling beside her. "Madam, what in God's name are you doing out here alone?" His voice was deep and urgent, and when Katherine looked up into his face she saw genuine concern in his dark eyes. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with strong features tanned by sun and wind and a shadow of stubble on his jaw. "Can you stand?" "I do not know," Katherine managed through chattering teeth. "I cannot feel my feet anymore." The cowboy did not waste time with more questions. He simply scooped her up in his arms as though she weighed nothing and carried her to his horse. Katherine wanted to protest, to maintain some shred of dignity, but her body would not cooperate. He settled her in his saddle and swung up behind her, wrapping his coat around both of them as best he could. His body was warm and solid against her back, and Katherine felt some of the panic recede. "My bag," she whispered. "I will get it. Hold tight to the saddle horn." He dismounted again briefly, retrieved her pathetic bundle of belongings and secured it to his pack horse. Then he was back behind her, one arm wrapped firmly around her waist, and they were moving. "My ranch is closer than town. We need to get you warm or you are going to lose those toes." Katherine wanted to ask who he was, why he was out in this weather, why he would help a stranger, but the words would not come. She focused on staying conscious as the horse moved through the deepening snow. The cowboy kept talking to her, his voice steady and calm, telling her about his spread just ahead, about how his housekeeper would have the stove going hot, about how she was going to be just fine. Katherine clung to that voice like a lifeline. Time became strange and fluid. At some point they passed through a gate, and then there were buildings emerging from the white. A barn, a corral, a sturdy log house with smoke rising from the chimney. The cowboy called out and a Mexican man emerged from the barn, his eyes widening at the sight of them. "Señor Nathan, what has happened?" found her freezing on the road. "Take care of the horses, Carlos. I need to get her inside now." Nathan Lawson carried Katherine into the house where blessed warmth hit her like a physical force. An older woman with silver hair and a round, kind face gasped and immediately began issuing orders. Nathan set Katherine down in a chair close to the stove, and the woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Chen, began carefully removing Katherine's frozen boots. "This is going to hurt, Mrs. Chen warned, and she was right. As feeling returned to Katherine's extremities, the pain was excruciating. She bit her lip until she tasted blood, trying not to cry out, but tears streamed down her face anyway. Nathan knelt beside the chair, letting her grip his hand so hard she must have hurt him, though he never flinched. "You are doing fine," he said quietly. "Just breathe through it. The pain means there is no permanent damage." Katherine did not know how long it took for the agony to subside into a more manageable ache, but eventually she could draw breath without feeling like she might shatter. Mrs. Chen brought warm blankets and hot tea, and Nathan finally stepped back, giving her space to collect herself. "I am Nathan Lawson," he said. "This is my ranch. You are safe here." Katherine looked at him properly now, taking in his tall frame, the way his dark hair was slightly too long and curled at his collar, the steadiness in his brown eyes. He had saved her life. That reality settled over her with profound weight. "Katherine Everett," she managed. "Thank you. I do not know what would have happened if you had not come along." "Nothing good." Nathan pulled up another chair and sat down, his expression serious. "What were you doing out there alone?" "That storm has been building all day." The shame of it burned in Katherine's chest, but she owed him the truth. She told him about her mother's death, about Marcus and his promise, about being left at the crossroads with nothing. As she spoke, she watched Nathan's jaw tighten and his hands curl into fists on his knees. "He left you out there to die," Nathan said when she finished, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Your own stepbrother. He never wanted me as family. His father married my mother when I was 17 and Marcus was already 23. He made it clear from the start that I was an unwelcome burden." Katherine wrapped her hands around the warm cup Mrs. Chen had given her. "I suppose I should not be surprised, but I truly believed he would honor his promise to our mother." Mrs. Chen made a disapproving sound from where she was preparing something at the stove. "Some men have no honor at all. You are fortunate Mr. Nathan was checking on the north fence line today." "Why were you out in such weather?" Katherine asked. Nathan shrugged. "I had reports that the fence was down in one section, and I wanted to see if we needed to bring the cattle in closer to the barn before the storm hit in earnest. Ranch does not run itself." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the falling snow. "That storm is settling in now. You will need to stay here until it clears. Mrs. Chen can set you up in the spare room." "I have no way to pay you for your hospitality," Katherine said quietly. "Marcus took everything." "I am not asking for payment." Nathan turned back to face her. "You nearly died out there. The least I can do is offer you a warm bed and hot food until it is safe to travel. We can figure out the rest later." Katherine felt tears prick her eyes again, but these were different from the ones she had shed from pain. Kindness from a stranger when her own blood had abandoned her felt almost overwhelming. "Thank you," she whispered, that night after Mrs. Chen had brought her a warm meal and shown her to a small but comfortable room. Katherine lay in a real bed under heavy quilts and listened to the wind howl outside. She thought about how close she had come to dying, about the strange turns her life had taken, about the cowboy who had appeared out of the storm like something from a dime novel. Nathan Lawson was nothing like any man she had known. There was a quiet strength about him, a capability that needed no boasting. He had carried her into his home without hesitation, had held her hand through the worst of the pain, had offered her shelter without expectation of anything in return. Katherine knew she should sleep, but her mind would not quiet. What would she do when the storm passed? She had no money, no prospects, no family who wanted her. Perhaps there was work in Georgetown or Denver, but winter was a hard time to find employment. She would have to figure something out. She refused to be a burden on Nathan Lawson any longer than absolutely necessary. The storm lasted 3 days. Katherine learned quickly that Nathan was a man of few words but considerable action. His ranch was small but well run, with a dozen head of cattle, several horses, and a pair of milk cows. He had Carlos, who managed much of the livestock work, and Mrs. Chen, who kept the house and cooked with quiet efficiency. Nathan himself seemed to be everywhere, always working, always tending to something that needed doing. On the second day, when Katherine's feet had healed enough for her to move about carefully, she insisted on helping Mrs. Chen with the household tasks. The older woman tried to protest, but Katherine was firm. "I cannot simply sit idle when you are all working so hard," Katherine said. "Please let me be useful." Mrs. Chen studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. You can help me with the bread. My arthritis makes kneading difficult in this cold weather." Working alongside Mrs. Chen, Katherine learned that the woman had come to Colorado from San Francisco 15 years ago with her late husband, a prospector. When he died in a mining accident, she had been left with nothing. Nathan's father had given her work as their housekeeper, and when the elder Lawson passed 2 years ago, Nathan had insisted she stay on. "He is a good man," Mrs. Chen said simply. "Better than his father was, though I should not speak ill of the dead. Nathan built this ranch himself, worked every job from cowhand to freighter to save the money. He has been running this place alone since his father died." "He has no family?" Katherine asked as she kneaded the dough. "His mother died when he was very young." "He has a sister back east somewhere, married to some banker. They do not talk much." Mrs. Chen checked the stove temperature. "Nathan is married to this land, I think. He works too hard and talks too little, but his heart is good." Katherine found herself watching Nathan more carefully after that conversation. She noticed how gently he handled the horses, how patiently he explained things to Carlos, how he always made sure Mrs. Chen was not overtaxing herself. When he came in from the cold, stamping snow from his boots, his eyes would find Katherine and he would give her a small nod, as if checking that she was still there, still all right. On the third evening, the storm finally broke. Katherine stood at the window watching the clouds part to reveal a spectacular sunset painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of pink and gold. She knew that tomorrow she would need to make plans to leave, to impose on Nathan's generosity no longer. The thought made her chest feel tight. Nathan came to stand beside her at the window. Beautiful, is it not? This country can be harsh, but there are moments when I cannot imagine living anywhere else. I have never seen anything like it, Katherine admitted. In Kansas, everything was so flat. These mountains feel like they touch the sky. They very nearly do. Nathan was quiet for a moment. Katherine, I have been thinking about your situation. Katherine turned to look at him, her heart sinking. Here it came, the polite request for her to move on. I know I should leave as soon as possible. I have imposed on your kindness long enough. That is not what I was going to say. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, looking unusually uncertain. I was going to suggest that you might consider staying on here. Mrs. Chen could use the help, especially with winter setting in hard. The work is not glamorous, but I can pay a fair wage and provide room and board. Katherine stared at him. You are offering me a job, if you want it. I know it is not what you probably hoped for your life, working as help on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. But it is honest work, and you would be safe here. Nathan met her eyes. I understand if you would rather head to Denver and look for something else. I will give you money for the stagecoach and a letter of reference, but the offer stands if you want it. Katherine felt something warm unfurl in her chest. You would do that? Give me money to leave, even though you owe me nothing. You were left to die in the snow. I figure the world owes you a bit of kindness to balance that out. Nathan's mouth quirked in what might have been the beginning of a smile. So what do you say? Will you stay? Katherine thought about Denver, about trying to find work in a city where she knew no one, where she would be alone again. Then she thought about this warm house, about Mrs. Chen's gentle company, about working with her hands and earning her own way, about seeing Nathan at the dinner table each evening, listening to his quiet observations about the ranch and the weather and the territory. I will stay, she said. At least through the winter if the offer is genuine. It is. This time Nathan did smile, and it transformed his usually serious face. Welcome to the Lawson Ranch, Katherine Everett. The days that followed established a new rhythm. Katherine woke early to help Mrs. Chen prepare breakfast for the men, then spent her mornings doing housework, mending, and cooking. In the afternoons, when the daylight was best, she often found herself helping with other tasks around the ranch. Carlos taught her how to collect eggs from the temperamental hens and how to milk the cows. Nathan showed her how to care for the horses, explaining their different personalities and preferences. Katherine discovered she loved the work. It was physically demanding but satisfying in a way her previous life had never been. In Kansas, she had been expected to be decorative and quiet, to wait for some man to marry her and take responsibility for her care. Here, she was useful. Her efforts mattered. When she successfully baked a perfect batch of bread, or helped Carlos deliver a difficult calf, she felt a pride that was entirely new. She also found herself increasingly aware of Nathan in ways that made her cheeks flush. The way his shoulders moved when he swung an axe to split wood. The rare sound of his laugh when Carlos told a joke at dinner. The gentleness in his hands when he checked her feet one evening, making sure they had truly healed with no lasting damage. Katherine tried to tell herself it was simple gratitude, nothing more, but she was not very convincing even to herself. Christmas came quietly to the ranch. Mrs. Chen made a special dinner, and Nathan surprised them all with small gifts. A new shawl for Mrs. Chen, a fine knife for Carlos, and for Katherine, a book of poetry that must have come from his own small collection. I noticed you reading the almanac the other day, Nathan said with some embarrassment as Katherine carefully turned the pages. Thought you might enjoy something with better writing. It is wonderful, Katherine said softly, running her fingers over the leather binding. Thank you, Nathan. I am sorry I have nothing to give you in return. You have already given plenty. Nathan gestured around the warm, clean house. Mrs. Chen is happier than she has been in years, having help and company. The place runs smoother. That is gift enough. That night, Katherine sat by the fire reading the poetry while Nathan worked on repairing a bridle. The comfortable silence between them felt intimate in a way that made Katherine's heart beat faster. When she looked up and found Nathan watching her with an expression she could not quite read, something passed between them that was not spoken but deeply felt. January brought bitter cold and heavy snows, and the ranch became an island unto itself. There was no traveling to Georgetown for supplies or socializing. They were confined to the ranch buildings, working to keep the animals alive and healthy through the worst of the winter. It was during this time of forced proximity that Katherine truly came to know Nathan. She learned that he had taught himself to read from his mother's Bible before she died, that he had been just 14 when his father took him from school to work full-time, that he had spent 10 years saving every penny, dreaming of owning land of his own, before he finally had enough to start this ranch, that he read books on animal husbandry and modern farming techniques, constantly trying to improve his operation, that he was lonely, though he would never say so directly. For his part, Nathan learned about Katherine, about her love of learning, curtailed when her father died and there was no money for school, about her skill with a needle and her talent for drawing, about her dry sense of humor that could make even Mrs. Chen laugh, about the dreams she had harbored of independence, of making something of herself beyond being some man's wife and bearing his children. Not that there is anything wrong with marriage and children, Katherine said one evening when they were alone in the main room, Mrs. Chen and Carlos having already retired. But I wanted it to be a choice, not my only option for survival. I wanted to know I could stand on my own first. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. I think that is wise. My parents married because my mother had no other options when her family died. She was never happy here. Hated the isolation, the hard work, the cold. My father became bitter about it, drank too much. It was not a good situation. He poked at the fire. I always told myself if I ever married, it would be to someone who chose this life, who wanted it, not someone who felt trapped. Do you want to marry? Katherine asked, then immediately wished she could take the words back. It was too forward, too personal. But Nathan did not seem offended. Someday, maybe, if I found the right woman, someone strong and capable, someone who understood what ranch life really means. He glanced at Katherine. What about you? Do you want to marry? I do not know anymore, Katherine said honestly. I used to assume I would because what else was there? But now, working here, earning my own way, I find I like my independence. Though I suppose that is easier to say when I am not actually alone, when I have people around me. She smiled. Perhaps the ideal would be a partnership. Someone to share the work and the life with, but who respected me as an equal. That seems reasonable to me, Nathan said quietly, and there was something in his voice that made Katherine's pulse quicken. The winter deepened, and so did the connection between them. It happened in small moments, Nathan's hand lingering on Katherine's when he passed her something at dinner, Katherine mending Nathan's favorite shirt with extra care, embroidering his initials on the pocket, conversations that stretched late into the night about everything and nothing. The way they had begun to move around each other in perfect synchronization, always aware of where the other was. Mrs. Chen noticed, of course, and said nothing, but Katherine sometimes caught her smiling to herself as she watched them together. In February, a break in the weather allowed Nathan to ride into Georgetown for supplies. He asked Katherine if she wanted to go along, to see the town, and perhaps post a letter if she had anyone to write to. Katherine realized with a strange pang that she had no one. Her mother was gone, Marcus was dead to her, and she had no close friends from her old life. This ranch, these people, had become her world. She went anyway, curious to see the town that was her closest neighbor. Georgetown was a mining town, rough and busy despite the winter cold. Men crowded the streets and the saloons, and Katherine felt grateful for Nathan's solid presence beside her as they visited the general store and the post office. In the store, while Nathan discussed supplies with the proprietor, Katherine browsed the sparse selection of women's goods. A bolt of blue calico caught her eye, and she found herself imagining a new dress, something that was not patched and worn. But the price was beyond what she had saved from her meager wages so far. "You like that fabric?" Nathan appeared beside her. "It is pretty, but I do not need it. My dresses are serviceable enough." Nathan made a non-committal sound and moved on, but when they loaded the supplies into the wagon, Katherine noticed a package that had not been on the list. Nathan caught her looking and had the grace to appear slightly embarrassed. "Mrs. Chen has been saying you need better clothes for the work you do. Consider it a practical investment in the ranch," he said gruffly. Katherine wanted to protest, but the gift was too precious. "Thank you," she whispered. On the ride back, Nathan was quieter than usual. Finally, as they neared the ranch, he spoke. "Katherine, I need to tell you something." Her heart jumped. "What is it?" "In town, several men asked about you, asked if you were my wife." He kept his eyes on the road. "I told them you were employed at the ranch. But it started me thinking about propriety and reputation, about how it might look, you living in my house." Katherine felt cold that had nothing to do with the weather. "Are you asking me to leave?" "No." Nathan said it firmly, finally looking at her. "No, that is not what I am saying at all. I am saying, I am making a mess of this." He pulled the wagon to a stop even though they were in sight of the ranch buildings. "Katherine, these past few months have been the best I can remember. Coming in from work and seeing you there, talking with you by the fire, watching you become part of this place. You fit here in a way I never expected anyone to." "Nathan." Katherine's voice caught. "Let me finish before I lose my nerve." Nathan turned to face her fully. "I know we have not known each other long. I know you have been through a terrible time and maybe I should wait longer. But I am not a patient man when I know what I want, and I want you to stay. Not as hired help, as my wife, as my partner." He took a deep breath. "I am asking you to marry me, Katherine, not because of propriety or reputation, but because I have come to care for you deeply. Because I think we could build something good together. Because I cannot imagine this ranch without you anymore." Katherine felt tears spilling down her cheeks. "You care for me. I think I am falling in love with you," Nathan said simply. "Maybe I already have fallen. I know I have no right to expect you to feel the same given everything you have been through. And if you say no, nothing has to change. You can stay on here as long as you want, with no pressure from me. But I had to ask. I had to know if there was any chance you might feel the same." Katherine thought about the girl she had been just 3 months ago, cold and abandoned at a crossroads. That girl could never have imagined this moment, this man, this choice being offered to her. She thought about Nathan's steadiness, his kindness, his quiet strength. She thought about the way her heart lifted every time he entered a room, the way she found excuses to be near him, the way she had started imagining a future here on this ranch. "I do feel the same," Katherine said, her voice shaking. "I was afraid to admit it even to myself. You saved my life, Nathan, and I did not want to confuse gratitude with something deeper. But it is something deeper. I love this life we have started to build. I love the way you are with the animals and with Mrs. Chen and Carlos. I love your dedication and your dreams for this ranch." She reached out and took his hand. "I love you, and yes, I will marry you." Nathan's face transformed with joy. He pulled her close, and Katherine went willingly, feeling his arms wrap around her as they sat there in the wagon under the cold February sky. When he kissed her, it was gentle and careful, full of promise. "I will do everything I can to make you happy," Nathan murmured against her hair. "I swear it." "I know," Katherine said, "and I will be your true partner in all things. I will work beside you and build this ranch into something we can both be proud of." They told Mrs. Chen and Carlos that evening, and the household erupted in celebration. Mrs. Chen produced a bottle of wine she had been saving for a special occasion, and Carlos played his guitar while they all danced in the main room of the house. Katherine felt light as air, whirling in Nathan's arms, watching his face glow with happiness. They married 2 weeks later in Georgetown, with Mrs. Chen and Carlos as witnesses, and a small gathering of Nathan's neighbors and friends. Katherine wore a dress she and Mrs. Chen had made together from the blue calico, and Nathan wore his best suit, looking handsome and serious as he made his vows. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and Nathan kissed her in front of everyone, Katherine felt that she had truly come home at last. The wedding night was nervous and sweet. Nathan was gentle, patient with Katherine's inexperience, and when they finally lay together in the darkness of their shared room, Katherine felt a sense of rightness she had never known before. This man was hers now, and she was his, and they had chosen each other freely. "No regrets?" Nathan asked softly, running his fingers through her loose hair. "None at all," Katherine assured him. "This is exactly where I want to be." Spring came slowly to the high country, but when it arrived, it brought an explosion of life. The meadows turned green, wildflowers bloomed in impossible profusion, and the cattle grew fat on the new grass. Katherine worked alongside Nathan, learning every aspect of ranch management. She proved to have a talent for the account books, organizing their finances in ways that helped Nathan see where they could improve and expand. She also took over much of the horse training, discovering she had a gift for gentle the young animals. In June, they attended their first social of the season in Georgetown, a barn dance that brought together ranchers and miners and townspeople from miles around. Katherine wore a new dress, made of green cotton that brought out her eyes, and Nathan could not stop looking at her. When they danced together, moving in perfect synchronization, Katherine saw other women watching them with envy, and she felt a fierce pride. This strong, good man was hers. A miner named Thomas approached during a break in the dancing and asked if he might have the next dance with Katherine. Nathan gave his permission with a nod, but Katherine could see the tension in his jaw. When Thomas held her a bit too close and asked forward questions about how she had come to marry Nathan, Katherine shut him down firmly. "My husband saved my life and then gave me a home. I married him because I love him and I wanted to be his wife. That is all you need to know," she said coolly. Thomas backed off after that, and when Katherine returned to Nathan's side, he pulled her close and kissed her temple. "Thank you," he murmured, "for choosing me every day." "Always," Katherine promised. By July, Katherine realized she had not had her monthly courses in some time. She said nothing at first, not wanting to raise hopes if she was wrong, but when Mrs. Chen noticed her turning green at the smell of frying bacon one morning, the older woman's eyes lit up with understanding. "You are with child," Mrs. Chen said, not as a question but as a statement. Katherine nodded, her hand going to her still flat stomach. "I think so. I have not told Nathan yet. I wanted to be certain. He will be overjoyed. He pretends to be stoic, but that man wants a family so much it hurts." That evening, Katherine waited until they were alone in their room before telling Nathan the news. She was nervous, unsure how he would react, but his response was everything she could have hoped for. He swept her into his arms, laughing and kissing her, then immediately set her down gently as if she were made of glass. "Are you feeling well? Do you need anything? Should you be resting more?" Nathan's questions tumbled over each other. Katherine laughed. "I am pregnant, not ill. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. I will be fine." But Nathan fussed over her anyway, insisting she not lift anything heavy, making sure she always had enough to eat, worrying over every little thing. It was endearing and slightly exasperating, but Katherine loved him for it. The pregnancy progressed well through the summer and into fall. Katherine's body changed, her belly swelling with their child, and she felt more vital and alive than ever before. She continued to work, though she gave up the heavier tasks as Nathan and even Carlos insisted. Instead, she focused on the accounts, on preserving food for winter, on preparing a nursery in one of the small rooms off the main house. In October, a stranger rode up to the ranch asking for work. He was young, perhaps 20, and had a familiar set to his features that made Katherine's blood run cold. It took her a moment to place him, and then it clicked. "You are Marcus's younger brother," she said. "I saw you once at your father's funeral." The young man, who introduced himself as Peter, looked embarrassed. "Yes, madam. I am Peter Everett. I know you have no cause to want to help me given what Marcus did, but I am not like him. When I heard what he did to you, leaving you in that storm, I cut ties with him. I have been working my way west, looking for honest employment. I heard in town that the Lawson Ranch sometimes needs hands." Nathan, who had come to stand protectively beside Katherine, studied Peter with a hard gaze. "Your brother left my wife to die. Give me one good reason I should trust you." "I cannot, except to say I am not Marcus. I never approved of how he treated Mrs. Lawson or her mother, but I was too young and too weak to stand up to him. I am trying to be a better man now." Peter met Nathan's eyes squarely. "I will work hard, I will prove myself. That is all I can offer." Nathan looked at Katherine. "It is your decision. If you do not want him here, I will send him on his way right now." Katherine thought about Marcus, about the cruelty and abandonment. Then she looked at Peter, seeing genuine regret in his young face. She thought about second chances, about how Nathan had given her one when she had nothing. "Everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves," Katherine said quietly. "You can stay through the winter, Peter. Work hard, be honest, and we will see where we stand come spring." Peter's face showed profound relief. "Thank you, Mrs. Lawson. You will not regret this." He proved true to his word. Peter worked harder than anyone, taking on the dirtiest and most difficult tasks without complaint. He was respectful to Katherine, deferential to Nathan, and gradually became part of the ranch's small community. Over time, Katherine found she enjoyed having him around. He told her stories about her mother from before the marriage, about the woman she had been when she was younger and happier. It was a gift Katherine had not expected. Winter settled in again, Katherine's second at the ranch but her first as Nathan's wife and mother of his child. Her belly was large now, the baby moving and kicking constantly. Nathan would place his hand on her stomach in the evenings, marveling at the life they had created together. "I hope it is a girl who looks like you," he would say. "I hope it is a healthy baby, regardless of anything else," Katherine would respond, though secretly she hoped for a son with Nathan's steady brown eyes. On a frigid night in January of 1878, Katherine's labor began. Mrs. Chen took charge immediately, having served as midwife to many women over the years. Nathan paced the main room like a caged animal while Mrs. Chen and Carlos's wife Maria, who had come up from their cabin to help, attended to Katherine. The labor was long and difficult. Katherine had not realized how much pain would be involved, how her body would feel like it was being torn apart. She clung to Mrs. Chen's hand and to the memory of Nathan's love, using them both as anchors against the waves of agony. Finally, as dawn broke over the mountains, their son came into the world. He had a lusty cry and a head full of dark hair, and when Mrs. Chen placed him in Catherine's arms, she wept with overwhelming love and exhaustion. Nathan was allowed in then, and the look on his face when he saw his son would be burned into Catherine's memory forever. Wonder, joy, fear, and love all mixed together. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed and touched the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered. "You are amazing. Thank you, Katherine. Thank you for this gift." They named him Thomas after Nathan's father, with the middle name William after Catherine's father. Little Thomas was a good baby, healthy and strong, and the entire ranch seemed to revolve around him in those early days. Carlos carved him a cradle. Mrs. Chen knitted countless tiny garments, and Peter proved surprisingly good with the infant, able to calm him when he was fussy in ways that made Nathan shake his head in amazement. Katherine adjusted to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else. The sleepless nights were hard, and she often felt overwhelmed by the responsibility of caring for such a tiny, dependent being. But watching Nathan with their son, seeing the gentle way he held Thomas and talked to him, made everything worthwhile. Spring came again, and with it, the annual cycle of ranch work. Katherine, with Thomas in a sling against her chest, supervised where she could no longer do the physical labor. Nathan hired Peter on permanently, and they took on another hand as well, an older man named Dutch who had decades of cattle experience. The ranch was thriving. The beef prices were good, and Nathan's careful management was paying off. He was able to buy additional acreage and increase the herd size. Katherine's organizational skills and attention to the accounts meant they had savings for the first time, a buffer against disaster. One evening in May, as they sat on the porch watching Thomas toddle around the yard under Mrs. Chen's watchful eye, Nathan pulled Katherine close. "I have been thinking," he said, "about building a bigger house. This cabin was fine for a bachelor, but we have a family now. We should have a real home with space for Thomas to grow and maybe for more children someday." "More children?" Katherine raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying you want to put me through that again? Only if you want to. But I would not object to a few more little ones running around." Nathan grinned. "Besides, you make beautiful babies." Katherine laughed and kissed him. "A bigger house sounds wonderful. And yes, maybe more children in time, but let this one get a bit bigger first." They spent that summer planning and beginning construction on a new house on a slight rise with a view of the mountains. It would be a proper 2-story structure with 4 bedrooms, a separate dining room, and even indoor plumbing that Nathan was determined to figure out. The work was slow, done in between all the regular ranch tasks, but by autumn, the frame was up and the roof was on. In September, a letter arrived addressed to Katherine. It was from Marcus, of all people, written from a jail in Kansas. In it, he claimed to have found religion and wanted to apologize for his treatment of her. He said he had been convicted of fraud and was serving a 2-year sentence, and that he had spent much of his time in prison thinking about his sins. He asked for her forgiveness, though he said he did not deserve it. Katherine read the letter twice, feeling nothing but a distant sort of pity. Marcus had been a cruel man, but his cruelty had inadvertently led her to Nathan and to this life she loved. In a strange way, she owed him a debt. She wrote back, a short letter saying she forgave him and hoped he would truly change his ways. But she did not tell him where she was or anything about her life now. That chapter was closed. "You are a better person than me," Nathan said when she told him about the letter. "I would not have been so generous." Holding on to anger would only hurt me, Katherine said simply. I have too much good in my life now to waste energy on bitterness. By the time Thomas turned 2, the new house was finished and they moved in with great ceremony. Katherine stood in the large kitchen with its big windows and modern stove and felt tears of joy. This was her home, truly hers, built by her husband's hands with her input and dreams woven into every board. That winter was easier than the previous ones, cozy in their new house with plenty of room. Katherine discovered she was pregnant again in December, and this time Nathan's reaction was more controlled, though no less joyful. I will try not to hover quite so much this time, he promised. You will fail, Katherine said with a laugh, but I love you for it anyway. Their daughter was born in August of 1880, arriving quickly and with far less difficulty than Thomas had. She had Katherine's red gold hair and Nathan's brown eyes, and they named her Sarah Rose. Thomas, now 3, was fascinated by his baby sister and wanted to help with everything. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Nathan was becoming known throughout the territory as a fair employer and skilled cattleman. People sought his advice, and he was elected to the local Cattlemen's Association board. Katherine managed the household and the accounts with skill, and also began teaching Thomas his letters, already planning for his education. Peter, who had proven himself invaluable over the years, eventually married a girl from Georgetown and built a small house on the ranch property with Nathan's permission and help. He and his wife Margaret became like family, and their children grew up alongside Thomas and Sarah, Mrs. Chen, growing older but still sharp as a tack, reduced her duties and spent most of her time teaching the children and working on a beautiful garden she had cultivated behind the house. Carlos and Maria remained on the ranch as well, Carlos teaching Thomas to ride almost as soon as the boy could walk. The years passed in a pattern of work and love, challenge and triumph. There were hard times. A brutal winter in 1882 that killed a third of the herd, a drought in 1884 that tested everyone's faith, a month when little Sarah was desperately ill with fever and they thought they might lose her. But they weathered each storm together, Nathan and Katherine's partnership growing deeper and stronger with each passing year. In 1885, Katherine gave birth to twins, 2 boys they named Daniel and Samuel. Thomas was now 7 and a responsible older brother. Sarah at 5 was a spirited little girl who reminded Nathan of Katherine more every day. The house was full of noise and laughter and the beautiful chaos of family life. One evening, after the children were finally in bed and the house was quiet, Nathan and Katherine sat together on the porch swing he had built, watching the stars come out over the mountains. You ever think about that day, Nathan asked, when I found you at the crossroads? Sometimes, Katherine admitted, it feels like a lifetime ago, like that was a different person. In many ways it was. We have both changed so much. Nathan took her hand, his thumb rubbing over her wedding ring. But I think about it often. About how easily I might have gone a different route that day, or left home 10 minutes later, or made any number of small choices that would have meant I never found you. It terrifies me when I think about it. But you did find me, and you saved me in more ways than just from the cold. Katherine leaned her head on his shoulder. You gave me a home and a purpose and a partnership I never dreamed I could have. You gave me a life worth living. You did the same for me, Nathan said quietly. This ranch was just work before you came. It was something to fill my days and keep me busy. You made it a home. You made it matter. He turned to look at her, his face serious in the starlight. I love you, Katherine, more now than even on the day we married. You are my heart. And you are mine, Katherine whispered, and kissed him as the stars wheeled overhead, and the mountains stood silent witness to their love. By 1888, the Lawson Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the region. They ran over 500 head of cattle, employed a dozen hands, and had built a reputation for quality beef and well-trained horses. Nathan was respected throughout Colorado Territory, sought after for his advice and leadership. Katherine had started a small school on the ranch, teaching not just their own children but those of their employees and nearby families. She loved the work, loved seeing young minds open to learning. Thomas at 10 was already helping seriously with the ranch work, riding out with his father and learning everything Nathan could teach him. Sarah at 8 was showing signs of being a talented artist, spending hours sketching the horses and mountains. The twins, Daniel and Samuel, now 3, were into everything with the boundless energy of young boys. In September of that year, a well-dressed man arrived at the ranch asking to speak with Katherine. He introduced himself as a lawyer representing Marcus Everett's estate. Katherine's heart sank, wondering what trouble her stepbrother had caused now. "Mr. Everett passed away 3 months ago of consumption," the lawyer explained. "But before his death, he changed his will. He left everything he owned to you, Mrs. Lawson, with a letter of apology." Katherine was stunned. "I do not understand. Why would he do that?" The lawyer handed her a sealed envelope. "He said in his will that he had wronged you terribly and wished to make amends. The estate is not large, perhaps $2,000 after debts are settled, but it is yours if you wish to claim it." After the lawyer left, Katherine opened Marcus's letter. In it, he wrote about his time in prison, about truly finding faith, and about the guilt that had haunted him for leaving her to die. He wrote that he knew money could not undo his actions, but he hoped it might do some good for her family. He closed by saying he hoped she was happy, that she had found the life she deserved. Katherine showed the letter to Nathan that evening. "I do not know what to do with this," she admitted. "Part of me wants to refuse it, to not accept anything from him. But the other part thinks about what we could do with that money. We could expand the school or build a real bunkhouse for the hands, or save it for the children's education." "It is your decision," Nathan said. "He was your family and the money is yours. I will support whatever you choose." After much thought, Katherine accepted the inheritance. She used part of it to build a proper schoolhouse on the ranch, large enough for 20 students with real desks and a good stove. The rest she put in savings for their children's futures. She also wrote to Peter, telling him about his brother's death and his change of heart. Peter came to visit that evening, and they talked about Marcus, about forgiveness, about the strange ways life could turn. "He was not a good man for most of his life," Peter said. "But I like to think he found some peace at the end. And I am grateful every day that his worst act led me here, to this place and this family." The 1890s brought new challenges and changes. Colorado achieved statehood in 1876, but the territory continued to develop rapidly. A rail line was extended close to Georgetown, making it easier to ship cattle to market. Nathan and Katherine invested in new breeding stock, improving the quality of their herd. They bought more land, expanding the ranch to over 1,000 acres. Their children grew and flourished. Thomas became a skilled horseman and cattleman, working alongside his father as a true partner by the time he was 16. Sarah, to everyone's surprise including her own, developed a passion for veterinary medicine, reading every book she could find on animal husbandry and treating sick animals on the ranch with natural talent. The twins, who had been inseparable as toddlers, developed distinct personalities as they grew, Daniel becoming studious and interested in law, Samuel proving to be a natural businessman with ideas about expanding into different markets. In 1895, When Thomas was 17, a neighboring rancher approached Nathan about a marriage between Thomas and his daughter Emma. It was the old way of doing things, alliances through marriage, but Nathan refused immediately. "My son will marry for love or not at all," Nathan told the rancher firmly. "I will not arrange his future like he is a piece of property." When he told Katherine about the conversation, she kissed him. "You are a good father," she said, "and a wise man." Thomas did eventually fall in love with a young woman named Alice who came to Colorado from Boston to visit her uncle. She was educated and independent-minded, and she and Thomas courted for 2 years before marrying in 1898. Katherine loved her daughter-in-law immediately, seeing in Alice the same spirit that had driven her own desire for independence and purpose. Sarah, meanwhile, had set her sights on attending veterinary school, though few institutions accepted women. With Nathan and Katherine's full support, she applied to the Ontario Veterinary College in Canada, one of the few that would consider female students. When she was accepted in 1897, the whole family celebrated, even though it meant she would be far from home. The twins, still finding their paths, both showed academic promise. Nathan and Katherine were determined that all their children would have the education they themselves had been denied, and they saved and planned to ensure that was possible. On a crisp autumn evening in 1899, as the century drew to a close, Nathan and Katherine celebrated their 21st wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren Alice had given them a grandson, Nathan Jr., the year before, gathered for a party at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from miles around. There was music and dancing and abundant food, and Katherine felt almost overwhelmed by the bounty of her life. Later, when the guests had departed and the children were settled, Nathan led Katherine out to the porch where they had spent so many evenings over the years. 21 years, he said, shaking his head in wonder. "It feels like both forever and no time at all." "I know what you mean," Katherine said. She was 45 now, with silver threads in her red gold hair and lines around her eyes, but Nathan still looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life. That I get to wake up next to you every morning, that we built all of this together." "You have any regrets?" Nathan asked. "I know this life was not what you planned. It was thrust upon you by circumstances." Katherine thought about the frightened, angry girl at the crossroads, abandoned and alone. She thought about the kind cowboy who had saved her, about the partnership they had forged, about the family they had created, and the life they had built. "Not a single regret," she said firmly. "Being left at that crossroads was the worst moment of my life. But it led to all the best moments. It led to you. And I would go through it all again if it meant ending up here in this life with you." Nathan pulled her close, and they stood together watching the stars appear, just as they had done countless times before. The mountains stood eternal around them, the ranch was quiet and peaceful, and Katherine knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The new century brought new changes. The Wild West was slowly being tamed, the frontier closing, the old ways giving way to modern progress. Automobiles began appearing in Georgetown, though Nathan remained skeptical of them. Electricity came to some of the towns, and there was talk of bringing telephone lines to the rural areas. Through it all, the Lawson Ranch endured. Nathan and Katherine, now in their 50s, gradually began handing over more responsibility to Thomas and Alice. Sarah returned from veterinary school in 1902, one of the first female veterinarians in Colorado, and set up practice on the ranch, treating animals from all over the region. Daniel went off to law school, planning to return and help protect ranchers' rights in the increasingly complicated legal landscape. Samuel started a cattle buying business that brought additional income to the ranch. Mrs. Chen passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1903, and the whole family mourned the woman who had been so instrumental in Catherine's survival and integration into ranch life. They buried her on a hillside overlooking the mountains she had loved, and planted a garden in her memory that bloomed gloriously every spring. Carlos and Maria retired, moving into a small house in Georgetown to be near their own grandchildren, though they visited the ranch often. Peter, now 45, took over as foreman, managing the day-to-day operations with skill and dedication. In 1905, on a brilliant June day, Katherine woke to find Nathan already up and dressed, standing at the window of their bedroom looking out at the ranch he had built. "What are you thinking about?" Katherine asked, coming to stand beside him. "About how it all started," Nathan said. "About that crossroads in the winter and how finding you there changed everything. About how proud I am of what we built, not just the ranch but our family. About how lucky I am to have had you by my side for all these years." Katherine leaned against him, comfortable and content. "We are both lucky. We found each other when we both needed it most, and we made a good life together." "The best life," Nathan agreed. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I love you, Katherine Lawson. Every day I love you more. And I love you, Nathan Lawson, now and always." They stood together in the golden morning light, two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built a love that would last for all their days. Outside, the ranch was coming to life with the sounds of morning work. Their children and grandchildren were scattered across the property and beyond, living their own lives but always connected to this place, and to the love story that had begun at a crossroads in winter. Katherine thought about that frozen, desperate girl she had been, left to die in the snow. She thought about the kind cowboy who had saved her, and then given her so much more than just rescue. She thought about the years of work and love, of struggle and triumph, of children raised and a legacy built. And she knew with absolute certainty that every moment of cold, every moment of fear, every hardship they had faced had been worth it, because it had led her here, to this man, to this life, to this perfect moment of peace and love and absolute belonging. The Lawson Ranch would endure for generations, a testament to the partnership of two people who had found each other in the wilderness and built something lasting and true. But more than the land or the buildings or the cattle, the real legacy was the love itself, the kind of deep, abiding love that weathers all storms and grows stronger with each passing year. As the sun rose higher over the Colorado mountains, Nathan and Katherine walked down to the porch where they had spent so many evenings, where they had made plans and dreamed dreams and watched their children grow. They sat together on the swing, Nathan's arm around Katherine's shoulders, perfectly content. "What shall we do today?" Nathan asked. Katherine smiled. "Everything and nothing, just be together like always." "Sounds perfect to me." And it was perfect, because they were together. And that had been enough from the very beginning and would be enough until the very end. The cowboy who had found her at the crossroads, and the woman who had been left to die in the snow, had created something beautiful and lasting, a love story that would be told and retold in their family for generations to come. The sun climbed higher, birds sang in the trees, and life went on in the gentle rhythm they had established over nearly 3 decades together. There would be more years ahead, more challenges and joys, more children born and milestones celebrated. But in that moment, sitting on their porch overlooking the ranch they had built together, Nathan and Katherine knew they had everything they needed: each other, their family, and the deep satisfaction of a life well lived and a love well earned. The mountains stood watch as they always had, silent witnesses to the power of second chances and the miracle of finding home in the most unexpected places. And if you listened carefully, you might hear the echo of a promise made long ago to be partners, to build together, to love each other through all the days of their lives. A promise kept, a love fulfilled, a story with the happiest of endings.